The late 19th century witnessed a period of intense competition among European powers for control of African territories. This period, known as the Scramble for Africa, saw France emerge as a major player, eager to expand its empire and influence. Driven by economic ambitions, political rivalries, and a sense of cultural superiority, France embarked on a campaign of conquest and colonization across the African continent. This marked the beginning of a complex and often tumultuous relationship between France and its African colonies, one that would shape the destinies of both for generations to come. France's colonial ambitions in Africa were fueled by a number of factors. The Industrial Revolution had created a huge demand for raw materials, and Africa was seen as a vast reservoir of resources waiting to be exploited. Rubber, timber, diamonds, and other valuable commodities were abundant in many parts of Africa, and France was eager to secure access to these resources. In addition, France saw colonies as a source of prestige and power on the world stage. A large colonial empire was seen as a sign of national strength and a way to project French influence globally. France's entry into the Scramble for Africa was marked by a series of expeditions, military campaigns, and treaties with local rulers. French explorers and soldiers ventured into the interior of Africa, often encountering resistance from indigenous populations. However, France's superior military technology and its willingness to use force ultimately allowed it to establish control over vast swaths of territory. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, which aimed to regulate European colonization and trade in Africa, formalized France's claims to its colonies, granting it legal recognition for its territorial acquisitions. The Scramble for Africa had a profound impact on the continent. It led to the redrawing of borders, the displacement of populations, and the destruction of traditional ways of life. The imposition of European rule also had a significant impact on African economies, as they were integrated into colonial systems of production and trade. The legacy of the Scramble for Africa is still felt today, as African countries continue to grapple with the challenges of development, poverty, and conflict that were in many ways inherited from their colonial past. France's colonial empire in Africa was largely concentrated in West and Central Africa. This vast region, stretching from the shores of the Atlantic Ocean to the depths of the Sahara Desert, became a key theater for French colonial ambitions. Countries like Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Chad all fell under French rule, their destinies intricately intertwined with the policies and practices of their European colonizer. Each colony held its own unique significance within the broader framework of the French Empire, providing a range of resources and strategic advantages. Senegal, situated on the westernmost point of the African continent, served as a crucial trading post and a gateway to the interior. Its coastal location made it a strategic asset for France, facilitating the movement of goods and people between Europe and Africa. Côte d'Ivoire, with its fertile lands and abundant cocoa production, became a major agricultural hub, supplying France with valuable raw materials. Guinea, too, played a vital role in the French colonial economy, known for its reserves of bauxite, a key ingredient in aluminum production. Further inland, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, though less endowed with natural resources compared to their coastal counterparts, held strategic importance due to their location along trans-Saharan trade routes. These landlocked countries served as bridges connecting North and West Africa, facilitating the flow of goods, ideas, and people across the Sahara Desert. Chad, bordering the vast expanse of the Sahara, held strategic significance as a buffer zone, protecting French interests from potential threats emanating from the north. The diversity of resources and strategic locations of these West and Central African colonies made them valuable assets to the French Empire. The establishment of French rule in these colonies was a gradual process, marked by a combination of military expeditions, diplomatic maneuvers, and alliances with local rulers. French explorers, soldiers, and administrators played a pivotal role in extending French authority, often encountering resistance from indigenous populations seeking to preserve their autonomy and way of life. The imposition of French rule brought about significant transformations in these colonies, impacting their political systems, economies, and social structures. Traditional power structures were often disrupted, replaced by French administrative systems. France's colonial administration in Africa was characterized by a policy of direct rule, a system in which French officials held direct authority over the colonies, with limited input from the local population. This centralized approach aimed to assert French control and facilitate the exploitation of colonial resources for the benefit of France. Central to this policy was the concept of assimilation, the idea that African colonies should be integrated into French culture and society. This involved imposing French language, education, and legal systems with the goal of creating a class of evolved Africans who would embrace French values and serve as intermediaries between the colonial administration and the local population. The economic policies implemented by France and its African colonies were designed to extract resources and generate wealth for the metropole. Cash crop production, particularly of commodities like cotton, coffee, cocoa, and groundnuts, was heavily promoted, often at the expense of traditional subsistence agriculture. This focus on cash crops for export left many colonies vulnerable to fluctuations in global commodity prices and created a dependence on France for their economic well-being. Infrastructure development, such as railroads and ports, was primarily geared towards facilitating the extraction and transportation of resources to France, rather than fostering balanced economic growth within the colonies. The social impact of French direct rule was profound. Traditional social structures and hierarchies were often disrupted, as French authorities appointed local chiefs and administrators who were loyal to the colonial regime. The imposition of French language and culture led to the suppression of indigenous languages and traditions, contributing to a loss of cultural identity among some segments of the population. Access to education and healthcare remained limited for most Africans, further exacerbating existing inequalities. Despite the often oppressive nature of French colonial rule, resistance to French domination was widespread and took various forms. Armed uprisings led by charismatic figures challenged French military superiority, while religious leaders often played a pivotal role in mobilizing resistance, appealing to shared beliefs and values. Intellectuals and writers emerged as powerful voices of dissent, using their platforms to critique colonial policies and advocate for self-determination. The resilience and determination of these resistance movements laid the groundwork for the eventual struggle for independence. The mid-20th century witnessed a profound shift in the global political landscape. The aftermath of World War II saw the rise of nationalist and anti-colonial movements across Asia and Africa, challenging the foundations of European colonialism. France, weakened by the war and facing growing pressure both domestically and internationally, found itself increasingly unable to maintain its grip on its overseas possessions. In Africa, the seeds of liberation sown during decades of resistance began to sprout, fueled by a potent mix of factors. The return of African soldiers who had fought for France in World War II played a significant role in galvanizing anti-colonial sentiment. Having witnessed firsthand the hypocrisy of fighting for freedom abroad while enduring oppression at home, these veterans returned with a heightened sense of political awareness and a determination to achieve independence. The spread of education, albeit limited under colonial rule, created a new generation of African intellectuals, teachers, and leaders who questioned the legitimacy of French authority and articulated the aspirations of their people. The emergence of Pan-Africanism, a movement advocating for the unity and solidarity of African people, provided a powerful ideological framework for anti-colonial struggles. Inspired by leaders like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, Pan-Africanism transcended national boundaries, fostering a sense of shared destiny and a collective determination to end colonial rule. The establishment of the United Nations in 1945 and its commitment to the principle of self-determination provided a crucial platform for anti-colonial voices. As the tide of global opinion turned against colonialism, France faced mounting pressure to grant independence to its colonies. The rise of anti-colonial movements, coupled with the changing international context, created an environment in which the continuation of French rule became increasingly untenable.